understand your audience, understand how to communicate with your audience. And then, I think it's about the stories that you choose to tell. Uh, Sometimes something might be really interesting, but it might not make sense in your voice, or it might not make sense for your audience. And I think sometimes people make a mistake in thinking that, well, I'm interested in something, so they'll be interested in it. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. And so I think people need to be really deliberate about the stories that they're telling.
Oh, that is so true. And I think a lot of the time I would think a show, I'm like, oh, I don't know, is my audience going to like it? And usually it's the ones I was the most worried about that hit number one on the charts.
Yeah,
And
I know.
so it's like you really do have to study your audience. And you were talking about, you know, basically pivoting, and everybody
Hmm.
has had to do that during this pandemic. We've had to restructure everything. I had to throw my business plan out the window because I
Yep.
own a gym. So I had to do another
Mm.
business plan because we had to close. And so what do you think is, we just, when we thought we saw everything, this pandemic seems to be continuing. What do you think is, have you've seen most entrepreneurs do to become more creative? What's the most creative things you've seen?
Well, I mean, thematically speaking, I think the thing that entrepreneurs did that made all the difference, and that we should continue to do even when things go back to whatever normal is that entrepreneurs reconsidered the impossible. There were opportunities, ideas, changes around us that we had dismissed, resisted, thought were bad, never considered. And then the pandemic came along, and it forced us to think differently about what was available to us and what we needed to try, and things that we dismissed before, things that we thought were impossible. Sometimes we did them, and it turns out they were great. Not only great, but like something that we're going to keep doing once we're able to reopen and resume operations as normal. And that is a real lesson, because that's not a moment created by a pandemic. That's a moment that's always available to us that we were just shoved into because of the pandemic. You can always reconsider the impossible. The things that you think are stupid and possibly damaging might actually be the greatest ideas that you have. And they're not, it's not like they're beamed down from Mars, right? Like, it's not like they came out of nowhere. They've just always been here. So the ways that people have adapted their businesses, I think, have just been really interesting. I mean, I mean, I've heard really large companies, but the ones that always really stick with me actually are just these really tiny ones, like a woman who runs a wig shop in Baltimore and used to run it like a storefront. you know People are there, doors open, come on in, browse for wigs. And then she had to shift to a appointment only uh, business model. And that was scary to her, because you don't know what's going to happen. And now people are going to be able to walk in and buy these wigs, and say, we're going to make an appointment for wigs. Just seemed really scary. But what turned out to happen is that business grew and her costs dropped, and she's running a healthier business than she was before, because she no longer has to. It turns out, like, what happened was, well, all right, now that we're appointment only, I don't have to hire somebody to greet all these people who are walking into the store. And these people who are walking into the store off the street were never buying wigs. They weren't wig shoppers. They were just curious. They're browsing. So there's no reason to cater to these people. People who want wigs for a personal reason, religious, health, whatever the case is. And so they're
Mm.
actually thrilled to make an appointment, and to not have other people like randomly walking around and like looking at them while they're trying on this wig. They would prefer the personal interaction. So you would have never known that if you were running a wig shop, unless you were forced into it. But now look at that. I mean, again, running an appointment only business was always available to this woman, always available. Nothing was stopping her, except that she thought it was a bad idea because she was never forced to try it. Now she tried it. Turned out to be great.
Yeah, and I really think, like my father always said, that life is about adjustment, and that, you're if you're able to adjust, you're going to do well, because he always said that, it's an adjustment from birth to the grave, and those who adjust do well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the only way through, is to be constantly adapting. And it's the number one thing that I see successful entrepreneurs do. People ask me all the time, what are the qualities of a successful entrepreneur? The answer is adaptability.
What,
That's the thing.
what do you think is the most creative thing that you've done since the pandemic?
Me personally. Well, I mean, I've gone through quite a lot of change during the pandemic. I mean, the biggest, most obvious one is my setting. I in normal times live in New York in a small apartment in Brooklyn with my wife and two little boys, and that was totally fine. But we had an opportunity to go live with my parents during COVID, and not be squeezed into this little apartment. And so we were fortunate, and we took it. And so they're in Colorado. So now I'm in Colorado. It's been a full year, and
Wow.
I always, I love New York, and I always thought of myself as a New Yorker forever. And and the things that Colorado had to offer were not interesting to me at first: open space, outdoor activities. But I've come to love them, frankly, and it's really surprised me. I mean, I don't think we're going to stay here. I think we're going to go back to New York. But I was surprised at how easy it was to slip into a somewhat different identity. Not full identity, but I mean, I always thought of myself as the nonstop New Yorker, and now I'm like chilling in Colorado, and it just goes to show you that these things that you think are foundational to you sometimes are not.
Oh gosh, so so true. And I think we've all been finding this out when many things were canceled and we had to figure other things out.
Mhm.
What's the first place you want to travel when we're fully able to?
You mean except back to New York? Uh,
Yeah.
that's a really good question. I mean, I have two little kids, so everything is filtered through where would I like to travel? I mean, I'd love to go to like Greece, but is
Oh
that
yeah.
possible? I don't think so. Not right now. So I don't know. I mean, really, one of the greatest joys of my professional life has been traveling and speaking to groups. The very last group that I did before the pandemic, which was in like January of 2020, I guess, was the Chamber of Commerce in Hutchinson, Kansas. It was awesome. It was like a 1,000-person dinner in this like sports auditorium, and this is what I love. I love getting on a plane, going to somewhere where I don't know anybody, but having an opportunity to connect with people. And then I spent that whole time like talking to people. After the talk, I think I downed like a whole bottle of wine with the local reporter, like local newspaper reporter. It was so fun, and I really really have missed those things. So I cannot wait to get on a plane and go literally anywhere and meet with a bunch of people. That's like literally anywhere.
I think everyone out there is feeling pretty much that way. And I know, like you said, what you think your audience wants and what they want could be different. And I always thought it was just about the hard workout that I brought. But what I really recognized before that and during that, the pandemic, was that they wanted connectivity, just like you said, the whole
Mm-hmm.
seeing people, networking. But I do feel like I've brought connectivity even in a greater way through doing workouts on Zoom with my community. And so I feel like my business, I picked up the whole let's do online virtual. What do you think as far as businesses out there after this pandemic is over? Which businesses do you think we're going to see doing, booming and coming back strong?
I mean, I think that there's going to be a near universal business boom after this. I think there's so much pent up demand and such eagerness to return to things that I think every restaurant is going to be crazy packed, and every gym is going to be crazy packed, and prices of plane tickets and hotel rooms are going to skyrocket. Um, but more specifically, I think that the factors for who is going to really boom and who's going to have the greatest opportunities are in front of us right now. I mean, things will change. There will be surprises along the way,